That'll work. Down in Pennsylvania, Maryland. And Virginia, Carolinas, Georgia. Up here's where all the crap was happening. This is where England was messing with it. Virginia had a little bit of stuff. Who knew what was going on in Boston?
Boston.
But who knew?
Who knew? Nobody.
How easy was it to get information back and forth?
Not easy.
Took a long time, and getting accurate information was tough. So Samuel Adams decided he was going to start the Committee of Correspondence. Trying to spell that somewhere. What does correspond mean?
Correspond.
Communicate. Yes. A lot of times on the news, they'll say, we'll go down to our correspondent in New York. A reporter is a correspondent. So what does a correspondent do? What's a reporter do? Gives you information. So his idea was, we're going to write letters to each other. I'm going to write a letter to Thomas Jefferson. Who's going to write a letter to Ben Franklin? Who's going to write a letter to Sam Livingston? Who's going to write? They wrote letters back and forth to each other. And what they put in these letters? What's happening? Here's what the British government's doing to us. Here's what the troops are doing to us. Here's what's happening here. Because number one, not everybody knew. All these colonies were independent colonies. They weren't British colonies, but they were separate from each other. There was nothing that brought them together. What did this start to do? It started to unite them a little bit. If you're here in Maryland and not much is happening, and you hear what's happening in Massachusetts, you're like, you know, that ain't right. And something like that could happen here. Down here, I'm going to say that, don't write this down. In, okay. In 1776, what's happening in 1776? Independence, the war, and all that stuff. About a third of the country was like, yes, let's go to war. A third of them was like, no, we need our rights, but we don't need to go to war. And then a third of them didn't care. Down here, they didn't care. They actually didn't want war at all because they were making money. They were planting their crops, they were planting their stuff, they were selling it to England, everything was great. They didn't want to mess with it. Did I tell you about one eye?
Who?
One eye?
One eye Lily?
Okay, no, one eye. This 6-foot blonde showed up at Austin College one January, and I asked her out. And we went out, and she was wearing, okay, you know how in the 40s, those movies, women wear the big fashion hat looking thing? She had one of those hats on, that's fine. 6-foot blonde, who cares? And the more she talked, the more I realized she's from Michigan, which is fine. And she was from Michigan. And she talked like that. And it just got louder and more abrasive. I can talk to y'all for about an hour. No, I can talk to y'all for like 2 days, and you never realize I coach football. I have other things I can talk. She was a volunteer fireman, which is fantastic. Fireman, fire, volunteer fire, firehouse, fire truck, fire, water, fire truck, fire. I was like, oh, And then she says, I'm not interested in any kind of relationship. I was like, oh, no, me either. Just friendship, just no relationship. No, who needs that? No, I'm with you. So we'd see each other, hey, Rob, hey, Karen, what's up? And in the meantime, somebody said that Tuesday Smallwood was interested. Tuesday Smallwood was just one of them small town country pretty, just a natural pretty. And she ran track. And this is why this song didn't exist, but this song played whenever she walked through the middle of campus. And she had this long, wavy, not curly, long, thick, wavy, blondish, brownish hair.
Anywhere we go, people are amazed.
And as she
Our
walked,
quality control manager for construction, she goes out to some.
that's the song that played as she walked in there. It'd be silent. She'd walk in the door. So, anyway, I asked her out. She said yes. She lives in Karen's dorm. And I walked by Karen's room and said, "What's up, Karen?" "Hey, Ryle. What are you doing?" "Going out with Tuesday." "See ya." And then after that moment, I'd be going somewhere and I'd go, "Huh, she's right." She's always like there. "Huh, hey Karen." "Hey, Ryle." "Okay, see ya." "Oh," and it's just everywhere I went, then she'd just pop up. So, oh, what's going on? It started to get a little bit creepy. And the next year, the Gee finally said, we were sitting there at a basketball game. He goes, "Hey, Ryle, One Eye's here." I said, "What?" He goes, "One Eye." I said, "Who's that?" He goes, "Karen." That's what we named her, One Eye, because everywhere you go, there's like one eye that just follows you all. So that was our signal. "Hey, Ryle. Yeah. So I got to run and hide. Well, she would show up at the apartment with food, and she would cook supper, like almost every night. And I was starting to get really annoyed and really ticked, and my roommates were like, "No, Ryle, no, don't mess this up. This is great. This is fantastic. We get food. Don't mess this up." So my roommates were the Carolinas and Georgia. They liked what was happening. They were fine with England because they were making money off that deal. They were getting free supper out of that deal. I was Massachusetts. I didn't like at all what England was doing. I couldn't take it. She finally, there's a whole lot of things that happened. I have those pictures because she came to take a picture. She's taking a photography class, so at least I have evidence that I've attempted athletic stuff before. She was 6 foot and no fast twitch muscle fiber, no coordination at all. And she comes out to track one day and she has a Austin College women's track sweat top on, holding a girl's javelin. And I said, "What are you doing here?" "Coach said you're going to show me how to throw the javelin." I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, she has no athletic ability whatsoever. So we go to this conference track meet is in Alpine that year. Y'all know what Alpine is? It's out by Big Bend. It's a 13-hour bus ride from Sherman. And the baseball team is going to a doubleheader. So we have boys and girls track on the bus and baseball. So me and my roommate, I'm sitting here. There's the aisle, me, empty seat, roommate. And she clomps on the bus, 4:30 in the morning. "Hey, Ryle, is there a seat back there?" And he goes, "Yeah, come on." And he's in torture, but he knows I'm in torture, which makes him feel good. So the whole 13-hour bus ride, fire, fireman, javelin, fire, fireman, javelin, fireman, Michigan. And we're sitting there at the finals, and the baseball coach is there. He's the athletic director now. I said, "Coach, we were going to hand off the stick." They made a sprint relay out of the 4 girls. One Eye is one of them. She's going to come out of blocks and give the stick. I said, "Coach, we're going to hand the stick off, and Charlton is going to be handed off here and finish it." She says, "No," I said, "just watch." So 6 foot Karen gets down in the blocks and hands the stick off, and here comes Tarleton down the backstretch. And she didn't, if that happened to you, would you disappear? Would you blend into the scenery? She did not. She comes clomping up. "Wow, they were really great. Just look at me. I'm the person that did that." Anyway, she comes up to me with this guy. She goes, "Hey, Ryle." I'm like, "What?" "I want to introduce you to my boyfriend." I'm like, "Oh!" I think I almost gave him a hug. "It's so great to meet you. So happy." But I still am afraid that someday that door's going to open. And, "Hey, Ryle." I'm like, "No." Anyway, this is One Eye. Those are my roommates. They're happy. They don't want to go to war. All right, so does that make sense? Committees of correspondence. And then the Boston Tea Party. Y'all have heard of the Boston Tea Party your whole life. right?
Yeah.
It was not fun. It wasn't a joke. They had raised the tax on tea. And in England, tea is extremely important to their life, to their lifestyle, okay? Coffee is meaningless to me. It doesn't exist. But I know for some people, I've never needed a crutch, plus I'm not paying $4 for something to drink. I mean, that just doesn't, I don't understand that. The tax on tea went up. Whose tea is it? It's the king's. Okay? The ships that brought the tea. Whose ships is it? The king's. So these people, mainly the Adams boys and maybe Paul Revere, those guys, they did dress up like Indians, but they weren't messing around, they weren't laughing, it wasn't a joke. They trespassed on the king's ship. Is that a crime? Is that a major crime? They destroyed the king's property. Is that a major crime? Is that equivalent to treason? If you attack the king and attack the English property. So they committed treason. And they knew what they were doing. When I was a little kid, my dad had some meetings on the East Coast, and we went to Boston. I think I was 8. And we did the little tours, and we were walking around, and I had my mom's little Instamatic camera. It wasn't an instant camera, it was called Instamatic. But we'd gone to the Naval Academy, and I had a bunch of cool pictures of airplanes and stuff, and ships. And there's a pier leading out to the Boston Tea Party ship. And it had this railing like this. And you couldn't fall through, but you could like put your hand through it. And so out here was the boat.
That's beautiful.
Okay? That really isn't bad for just throwing a pin around up there. That's not bad, is it? All right. You can almost tell what it is. Almost.
Put a sail on.
You can't?
Put a sail on.
Well, I don't know if I had a sail.
Oh, it's a boat. There he is.
Okay.
That's a boat for
Okay.
sure.
So I stop here, and I'm a Mr. Professional Photographer, and I kneel down, and I stick the camera through the railing. I'm going to take a picture, and I go to pull it back. My thumb hits the railing, it knocks the camera down, and ka-plunk goes in the water, the harbor, the ocean water. And I start crying because, number one, I've lost my pictures, and it's my mom's camera. She's going to be mad. And I thought they might make me go down there and get it. And I pictured dead Tea Party skeletons down there, like pirate treasure, little hats, and it's going boom, 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 fly. I was like, I didn't want to go down with dead Tea Party skeletons. So maybe someday they'll recover the.
Did your mom ever get mad?
I'm sure she kind of did. Oh, Jonathan. I'm sure it was something like that. But
Scolded.
then I started bawling, and then I think Dad probably got mad, and then Mama would be nicer to me. But anyway, just like at my house. They cry, Christy helps, and I get mad. Stop it! What are you crying for? All right. Good enough. Now, we're going to do 6 of these, and we're done. We're going to do 6 of these. Keep that one, make sure your name's on it. Somebody's around, sit down.
I'm not the one that's not.
You ever play football? Kenny Stadium? It's my kid's middle name. It's Kenny. In the late 1760s. Oh, I didn't give y'all any, did I? That's all right.
No. That was needed.
So in the 1760s, 1770s, England passed some stuff. Parliament passed some stuff. They did not call them the Intolerable Acts. Boston called them the Intolerable Acts. What does intolerable mean?
You can't bear it.
Can't tolerate it. Can't bear it. These acts violated British law in the minds of the colonists. And I'm going to show you how they did. They sent troops to Boston. To help keep order. What is the king not allowed to do?
How's true? Raise taxes. Without parliament.
What about troops?
You can't harbor it in houses.
No, well, that's true. We'll get to that. Martial law. Remember martial law? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they took over everything, but in the troop,
Teachers, pardon the interruption. At this time, we need sophomores
in the
with
colonist
the last name
mind,
H through N to go to the cafeteria gym.
This was
Again,
equal
all sophomores with the last name beginning H through N go to the cafeteria
to
gym.
martial law.
Thank you.
So that violated their rights in their minds. Probably did in real life. Those troops were quartered in people's houses. That for sure is illegal. Can't do that. King will not. And I forgot to tell you this on the rights. The king was not allowed to interfere with elections or with like local legislative, local representative groups, like city councils. In the past, the king didn't like, let's say in Liverpool, okay, that's an English town. He didn't like what the city council was doing, so he would come in and say, y'all are done, and get rid of them. King wasn't allowed to do that. Well, in Massachusetts, the king eliminated or dissolved city councils.
King eliminated what?
City councils. That was against British law.
King dissolved city council?
Yes. King will not. King also threw some people in jail without a trial. Threw people in jail without a trial. King will not. So, why did the people of Boston have a problem with this? What are they?
Because it's going against everything King said he did.
They're English citizens. They have rights. And their rights are not being recognized. What was three things that was great about being English?
Teeth.
What's that?
Teeth.
Your freedom.
Okay, they had rights.
Yeah,
They had rights and freedoms.
This is all number one, huh?
Yes. What was their military?
Strong.
The best. They had the best military, strongest military. And they had the strongest economy. So all that added up to being, we're in a great spot. Well, they were just taking this away. What's hard about them taking this away but having this? They have the strongest military in the world, and they're taking your rights away.
I mean, it's hard to fight back.
Hard to fight back. Okay? You have to make a choice. If you're going to fight back, you have to make a choice. So they did not want a war. They didn't want to separate. They wanted their rights recognized. And with a strong economy, a lot of them were making some money. So you really don't want to end that. You like eating, you like stuff. The fall of 1774, how far away from Revolution are we?
2 years.
2 years. The committees of correspondence decide to meet and talk about stuff. The committees of correspondence, the people who write letters back and forth. So the colonies sent delegates. And these people they sent were the committees of correspondence. Does that make sense? People that were writing letters to each other decided to meet from all over the country. Now, it wasn't a country yet, but all the colonies, not all the colonies. I don't think the Carolinas and Georgia sent anybody at first. But they decided to get together and meet. And what did they call themselves? Y'all learned this last year in 8th grade. First Continental Congress.
United States.
Wait, no, because they weren't united, they weren't states. First Continental Congress. You spell Continental C-O-N-T dot. And at some point, they wrote a letter to the king. And what did this letter say? What were they asking the king to do? What was their problem?
They wanted their rights back.
They were saying, look, king, maybe you don't understand. Here's what's been going on. We just want to bring it to your attention so maybe you could fix it. But we don't want our English
So
rights.
The law, he's just going past the law.
Yes.
He's allowing him to do
Now, does
Nobody, he's just-
does Parliament really care that he's doing this?
Yeah.
Because he's maintaining order. If you're the government, if I'm the king, I'm doing that to keep order, and part of your job as a government is to maintain order. So,
like, if the king, is like is going against the laws, people can stop that, right? He has no power if nobody listens to him.
But he's the king.
but he's the king, and he has the military on his side.
Plus, the people in Parliament.
So the military's not mad about him breaking the laws because it's keeping.
It's
order.
just the colonies.
And he's
It's
only
not
targeting
us,
the
it's the colonies.
The people in England, the Parliament don't care.
Some of the people might have. Some of the people might have, but they weren't willing to do it. So they write this letter to the king, explaining you violated our rights. And the king gets it, and he farts on it, and he tears it up, and spits at him, and turns around and farts at the colonies. So at that point, after he didn't respond to the letter, they know it's either live with this or do something to change it. We either have to live like this or we have to do something to change it. And doing something to change it means death.
But
I always say, let's say the Packers come to town and they're pushing old ladies and they're stealing people's sandwiches, and we get tired of it and say, all right, Friday night, 7 o'clock, be there. And we decide we're going to play the Green Bay Packers. What's going to happen?
we'll cook him.
We're destroyed.
We're going.
They have the greatest military ever, and we don't even have an army. We have a bunch of farmers with guns that don't shoot straight.
You got heart.
But
We got
that,
hope.
when you have lines of that takes us somewhere.
You got Luke Brown.
But what I want to ask y'all to do, to understand this, you've got to put away the fact we won, and understand the fact America can't win. That's an impossibility for America, for the colonies to defeat England. It just can't happen. Does that make sense? You know the story, but it's something that can't happen. So then we got April of 1775. This happened around Boston. Paul Revere went around yelling at people. What happened in April of 1775?
British were coming.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
The one if by land, two if by sea, and the Minutemen popped up and they were ready to go. And at Lexington and
It's
start to see.
Mm-hmm. Lexington and Concord.
There you go. You shot her around the world.
Yes.
I spelled
Shot heard around the world.
or number 3, correct?
Around number 3? Yes.
In Concord.
Yes. This was the first battle of the Revolution. Oh, it's not really counted. The British are marching across this bridge, and the Minutemen scare them. They're not expecting it, and the British scatter. British retreat. So it was a short little battle. I don't know how many people died. I think maybe 1 or 2 Americans died, maybe. And it was over. The Continental Congress realizes now we have to do something. So they decide to put an army together and name George Washington the commander. So they decide to start a military. They never had one before. So they round up volunteers. Does America have any resources? It's not even a country. So there's not even a government. So there's no money. There's not really any organization. They decide we're going to have a military, we're going to name George Washington commander. He fought in the French and Indian War for the British. He was a war hero in the French and Indian War. He was a slave owner, George Washington. He was rich. And he was one of the most special human beings ever to live on the earth. He had leadership, which we all know that. He had leadership. But he was also selfless. He could have been the king. And he turned it down. He said, no, we don't need that. We need something different. So he was humble. He chose to live like the soldiers when he could have gone to his little mansion and hung out. He said, no, I'm with my men at Valley Forge. Everybody died, That's one of the reasons America won the Revolution was George Washington. So that's the smartest thing they ever did.
So what 2 things did they second?
They made an army, and they named George Washington the commander. Do I get it?
Is this all one remember?
What's that?
Are these all one remember?
We're going to 6. What do you know about
What was it saying?
George Washington? What do you know about something that's underlined in a sentence? What does that tell you it is? Or it's a
Or it's a title.
It's a book, a title. Common Sense was a pamphlet, a tiny little book, written by Thomas Paine. He titled it Common Sense because he was explaining why we needed to separate from England. He was explaining why we needed to separate from England. Usually you have your pen in your hand to write.
Common sense is why we separate from
He was advocating for independence.
What number were you on?
What's the Common Sense. He wrote Common Sense. There's about 2.5 million people in the colonies at that time. In 3 months, it sold about 150,000 copies. How did you do a book back then? You had to write it, and then someone had to put the letters in the little thing. Yes. And then ink it, and then put the paper in and make copies by hand. Every little book had to be made by hand.
That's how many copies were made in the first 3 months?
150,000. So that's pretty amazing that they were able to sell that many and make that many. Now, was America united at that time? What did I tell you earlier?
No.
What did I tell you about? What percentage of the country wanted to go to war?
1/3.
About a third. So it wasn't united. June 7th, 1776, the most important person you've never heard of stood up and made a motion in that little Continental Congress deal. Richard Henry Lee. From Virginia stood up and made the motion that America needed to separate from England. So in the little parliamentary procedure, he makes the motion, we need to separate from England.
Is that what happened on Kentucky?
He makes the motion, we need to separate from England. Now, Lee from Virginia. Does anybody have an idea? Lee from Virginia. What's that?
Generally,
General Lee. Robert E. Lee from Virginia. He's a prominent family from Virginia. I'm sure this is like an uncle or a cousin or something. Probably an uncle or maybe even a granddad or whatever. General Lee was an American hero. He led part of the military in the war of 1846, 1845, back with Mexico. He was a leader there. Lincoln asked him to lead the American armies in the Civil War. He was the #1 general in America. And I don't know him. I've learned some stuff about him. He wanted to do that, but he couldn't. How come he couldn't lead the American armies? Where's he from? Virginia. He said, I have to go home. I have to lead the Confederates. I have to fight against my country because this is my home. And a part of him did not want to do it, if not all of it, because he knew what was fixing to happen. He knew they wouldn't win. I'm sure he was a racist. I'm sure he was pro-slavery. I don't know, but probably had to be. What was Arlington National Cemetery? Unknown soldier and all the crosses. That's Lee. That's his land. They took that land after the Civil War as punishment for him fighting for the other side. So he lost his property there. That's probably his family somewhere. Okay, no more writing. I want you to listen to this.
And what about the July 2nd?
Oh, what do you think happened on July 2nd? We voted to ratify the Declaration of Independence, which means we declared independence from England on July 2nd, 1776. Anybody? Any comment? Anything? So July 2nd is Independence Day.
Last time, July 4th. Yeah.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you.
Teachers, pardon the interruption. At this time, we need any and all sophomores that have not had their picture taken to go to the
They
cafeteria
voted on
gym.
the rough draft.
Again, any and all
And,
sophomores that have not had their
ratified
picture
the
taken, please
rough
go to the
draft.
cafeteria gym at this
And
time.
then they
Thank you.
asked Thomas Jefferson to go back, clean it up, and come up with a final copy. And he came back with that on July 4th, and they voted on that officially. So July 2nd is actually the official Independence Day, but then we ratified the real one. So I'm going to read this to you, but I want to read parts of it. These people that signed this document. What do you know about the people that signed it? There's something you know about one of them. John Hancock, right? It's the biggest signature on there. What did he say the reason he wrote it so big was? He says, I want the king to hear this and to see this without the spectacles on. He was flipping off the king by putting it that big. All these men that signed this were the rock stars. They were rich, they were wealthy, they had everything. They had everything to lose. And they signed this piece of paper committing treason, and there's no chance of them winning. They know they're going to die. Now this declaration, there's two reasons for this declaration. Number one, tell England we're done with you. Number two, to explain to the world why. And why they want the world to understand why. What do they need? We need help. So we want to get some sympathy. when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bonds which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth to separate the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God's capitalized, entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. What right is that, or what theory is that? Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. What's that? Natural rights. Natural rights. We only did 3 of them. Natural rights. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. What theory is that?
The altar or abolish?
Oh, there's
There's only 3 of them. You got natural rights out of the way. Is that divine right?
no, that's
No.
like
Social contract. That's a social contract then. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries, of usurpations, all having Godzilla. He has refused his assent. Guys, stay with me. Stay with me. I need maturity right now. I need some maturity right now. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary of the public good. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states. Murders. That's a real word. What's he talking about probably there? Boston Massacre. Would you call that a murder?
Were people killed?
Yeah?
It was an accident.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
But probably.
And it was kind of asked for. Kind of. They brought it on. He probably thinks it really was murder. That's probably how he really sees it. And he's trying to get sympathy from other countries. Trying to get support. Now the last little phrase here. And for the support of this declaration with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. What's divine mean?
Good.
God stuff. Okay? Divine providence, capital B, provide. There's like 4 references to God in here. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Now today, honor doesn't mean anything. People lie, cheat, and steal all the time. It's okay. But back then, honor meant something. Who you were, what your reputation was, and what you stood for meant something. And they literally, when they said, we pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor, they meant that literally because they were committing treason. And they're the most famous Americans there was. Everybody knew where they were. They were going to get hung for treason when we lose this. But they were willing to do it anyway. And they did, most of them lost a lot of their fortunes. Some of them lost everything because they gave it like to fund the war. And one guy gave his ships. He was a shipper for our Navy, and all of them were lost. A lot of them lost their lives. A lot of them's families lost their lives. But they were willing to do it because of what they believed in. And what is Patrick Henry? What did he say? Give me liberty or give me death. And he meant it. These guys meant it. They would rather die fighting for what they know is right than to live without it. Because they knew what freedom was like, and they were going to make sure we had it. So don't gloss over this. Don't gloss over the fact that we won the revolution. And it's not a story. It's real life. And these guys put their lives on the line for this idea of this country, so we can be free. All right, y'all hang tight.
Yeah.
Y'all seen what's going on in Aurora, Colorado? Denver, Aurora, and the apartments?
It's a riot.
Well, not a riot, a bunch of migrants have taken over. A bunch of gang lords and stuff have taken over these apartments. And the people call the cops and call the government, and nobody's doing nothing.
Let's just hope it doesn't turn out like
What's that?
Let's just hope it doesn't turn out like
Well, Houston is having tons of problems, and it's going to creep up like to Fort Worth, and it's not going to get any better. Oh, crud.